Today's episode of What's on Your Bookshelf is brought to you by Insignia Training Partners, the leaders in outsourced L&D talent and resources. Insignia is a full-service learning and development company that provides L&D talent to design, develop, and deploy your training solutions. Insignia specializes in providing the right resources for your projects at a fraction of the cost as opposed to bringing on new full-time employees. This includes fractional Chief Learning Officer services for enterprise training strategy, instructional designers to develop your training content and materials, facilitators to deliver in-person or virtual training to your staff, LMS administrators to manage the process, virtual training producers to make sure your virtual training is engaging and effective, and coaches to support the learning after training is completed. If you don't have a training department, that's okay. Insignia can be your bolt-on training department. With Insignia, you get dedicated resources providing fractional services by specialists in their field. Whether it's onboarding new hires, upskilling your team, or ensuring compliance, Insignia designs impactful programs that stick. Visit insigniatraining.com to discover their full range of services and to schedule a free consultation. Insignia is your partner for training success.
Welcome to What's on Your Bookshelf with your hosts, Denise Russo and Samantha Powell.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back. It's another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf. This is a life and leadership podcast where we are living out loud the pages of the books on our shelves. My name is Denise Russo. I'm here today with my friend Sam Powell, and we are exploring book number 3 on our quest for happiness in 2024. And the book that we're discussing now is called The Happiness Project. If you don't yet have this book, Scott will have in the show notes a link for you to be able to get a copy of the book, but you don't need it to listen to these episodes and to grow with us. This book was a New York Times #1 bestseller. It has some great commentary from authors like Daniel Pink and some others that have really given some great remarks to Gretchen. Gretchen has an amazing podcast. She's got daily newsletters that she sends out. She's got a really great following. And so I'm looking forward to walking through The Happiness Project. And her tagline on the book says, "Or why I spent a year trying to sing in the morning, clean my closets, fight right, read Aristotle, and generally have more fun." And that's probably what got me when I decided to buy the book.
Yeah, I love that. I love that tagline. And as you read the book, that makes a lot more sense. And on the front of the book, one of the quotes is, "This is the rare book that will make you both smile and think," often on the same page. And I have found that to be true as I've started reading this for the first time. It's definitely an interesting read, right? It's one woman's application of how to make yourself happier. And she does it over a year and breaks it down that way. And so, yeah, today we're hoping to just sort of set up how we're going to talk about this book, go through the introduction, the getting started part of the book, just so that everybody understands how this one works and some context as we get going. But I enjoy, like, an introduction is usually like, okay, right? It's usually the part I read fast in a book, but this one, it made me smile a whole lot. And I actually had a whole lot of things highlighted in it because it was just so cute. And there was stuff that called back to other books that we had, talked about, right? Because she, I think, she even calls Sonia Lyubomirsky out in this book in the intro specifically. I was like, oh, there we go. Like, she read some of what we read too, to kind of turn around and apply this. So this was a fun start to this book.
Isn't that so serendipitous? Because we did not really, we planned out what books we wanted to do this year, but we didn't really necessarily say in what order. Was it there like a prescription for how we were going to do this? But as we've done this now being the 3rd book, every book has aligned just so beautifully. Even if we look back at last year, the way that we started out with Ikigai and intentional living, and then the life of John Wooden, who lived out loud those principles, and then flowed straight into, you can't do that if you don't have good habits. And we spend a lot of time talking about James Clear and Atomic Habits. And it was almost as if when we first did How of Happiness, that we thought to ourselves, man, this book perfectly comes after Atomic Habits. And now I hope that you'll find this book comes perfectly after The How of Happiness and Solve for Happy. I love how she started, before the getting started, she quotes Robert Louis Stevenson, and it says, "There is no duty we so much underrate as the duty of being happy." And so this has been an amazing, incredible journey of happiness over this year together. And as we get started with this book, I'll just give out some of the logistical parts of it, and then we'll talk about some of the things she shared, which I think were funny. The book is designed to be 12 topics, which are 12 months. And so she does one topic for every month of the year. We are not spending a year on the book. We're going to have a month a week. And so we're condensing it down.
Do the speed version of a year.
Speed version. But I think what could happen is our intent, because we always have good intentions. Let's see how the reality happens. But the intent is we want to finish this book before the end of the year so that you'll have listened to the episodes, gotten yourself a good baseline, and you can then start your own happiness project yourself in January. And then you can do it all through the year of 2025. So that's sort of the gist of it. These 12 topics are focused about how you can be on this quest for happiness. And maybe I'll just kick us off on the getting started part, because I know you have a lot of highlighter marks as well. My very first highlighter mark is where she says, "I was in danger of wasting my life."
Yep. That's isn't that it? And it's funny, there went in so right before the getting started, in the note to the reader section where you had the quote, I highlighted something where she said, during my study of happiness, I noticed something that surprised me. I often learned more from one person's highly idiosyncratic experiences than I do from sources like that detail universal principles. I find greater value in what specific individuals tell me worked for them than any other kind of argument. And I thought, man, if that isn't what this podcast is all about,
yes.
That's it, right? This is you and I living this stuff out loud, our thoughts, how we're applying, what we're doing with it, how we, think about this stuff. And, that's really what this book is about. And you're right. Like she's saying that, she's feel like she's wasting her life. And I highlighted the very first line because it made me laugh out loud in the getting started part. She said, "I'd always vaguely expected to outgrow my limitations." And I giggled at that because I was like, oh man, I can relate to that. I always thought I would outgrow my limitations, but sometimes the limitations take purposeful work, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes to outgrow something, you've got to put in effort. And this is her effort that she put in so that she could, really get to happiness and figure it out and not waste her life, right? She was in danger of wasting her life. And I thought that was funny as we got started. But yep, on a city bus. She gets
pretty dramatic. I was in danger. Years are slipping by. I never thought about what would make me happy. But then she pivots really quickly and she says, I have so much to be happy about. I live in my favorite place. I have a great family. I have a great job. I've got all these other things. Do you remember ever, you're a little bit younger than me, but there used to be these cartoons, maybe Tom and Jerry or something like that, Bugs Bunny, where there'd be like a little devil on somebody's shoulder and a little angel on the shoulder, and they start arguing with each other. And then the characters stepping back and looking at them arguing and finally realizing, and then you see this poof and those little characters disappear. And it's because you can control that. And you can control that. And so she goes on to talk about just these things where she had stepped outside of her own reality to look at her life, examine what was going on. And then she realized she was not happy, but she wanted to elevate her happiness. And so she says, I had everything I could possibly want, yet I was failing to appreciate it. And so that was how she started thinking about, could I be happier?
Right. And I loved this, like when she was talking about kind of having this moment on a bus where like, oh gosh, she's not appreciating her life. Like I could be much happier. Like, it's not that I'm not happy. It's that I could be a lot happier. And I feel like in that stepping outside of herself, it reminded me of the illusion of self from the last book, From Solve for Happy, because he talks about that we are the observers of our life. Like that's really who the self is. That's who we are, is the observer. And I think that like when you can step outside of what is happening and into this space of an observer, which is where she sat in this moment, like that's where our greatest like consciousness comes in. That's where we really can step into joy, really can step into happiness of like, I want to take some control. I want to be purposeful in how I'm walking through life. Like, I don't want life to happen to me. I want it to happen through me and with me and, in this space. And I had the exact same thing highlighted that you did, that, she was just failing to appreciate that. And like I don't know how many times that's happened in my life where it's like, oh my gosh, a week has gone by, a month has gone by, 6 months has gone by. And it's like, did I even stop for a second to appreciate what's going on in my life? And I feel so much more richness when I'm living in that space of, I don't know, a little bit outside of myself in that observer role.
I wonder if it's like when she was talking about having to learn from other people's stories, because we learned through Mo's story just recently. We learned through John Wooden's stories through the eyes of Pat Williams before that. And for me, you made a comment a minute ago about how isn't that just the purpose of what's on your bookshelf? And she actually calls that out. She says, they say that people teach what they need to learn. And I think I was sharing this with you a couple of weeks ago that I was having this sort of profound experience where we record these episodes in advance of when they actually come out. And then we listen to the episode the day they come out so that we can comment and share that there's a new episode out. And there was an episode that I recently listened to, and I'm listening to myself talk about things that I was going to hold myself accountable to doing. And I had this almost aha moment about, wow, I said out loud of my own mouth that I was going to do this one thing. And I did it, but just for like a minute or a day. And I didn't have a sustaining experience with it. And so what I have found, and I hope that you as listeners will find this perhaps as well, is that for me, I've actually already read all these books that we're going through, but it's almost as if when I'm reading them with Sam, that I'm going through them for the first time because I'm going through it now, looking through the lens of what you, Sam, are sharing and learning yourself. And then when we record it and listen to it back again, we're outside of like the in the moment conversations because we're not scripted on our talks here. Certainly we have highlights in the book and that, but our conversation is truly authentically just thinking of things in the moment while we're talking and sharing together like we would if we were at each other's house having coffee or a cold drink.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And she says, right, once she had this revelation and once she had this, this thought process is that as I sat on that crowded bus, I grasped two things. I wasn't as happy as I could be, and my life wasn't going to change unless I made it change. I decided to dedicate a year trying to be happier. And that's where this book takes us and where, where she goes. And she really explores like, a couple of questions in the beginning of like, what is she trying to really accomplish here? And, what does this look like? And she said she had to answer two crucial questions before she really went any further. She started reading a million books and, doing all the research and figuring out how does one become happier? What do the experts say? But she said that she had to first, did she believe that it was possible to make herself happier? And I thought that was right. It should be an obvious question, but I thought it was a really profound question. And I think it's a question we miss often when we're heading out on a journey and when we're working towards a goal is, do we really believe we can get there? And what does it look like when we get there? Right. And I know when I sit down with coaching clients, and that's one of the big things we start with is, what vision are you trying to get to? What goal are you trying to get to? And what things are blocking you? And sometimes it's your own beliefs that are in your way, right? Do I actually think I can make myself happier? Because if not, you got to tackle that first and foremost before you get into anything. I'm sure you see this all the time with clients too. It's one of the things we work through as coaches.
I think this is where businesses fall short, honestly. And we teach this in your signature story, which is our retreats that Sam and I host. And it's this, that if you want something different in your life, this is going to be mind blowing. You have to do something different.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's where business stops, right? They say, we need to make more money. What can we do to make more money? We need to stop losing money. What do we need to do to stop losing money? We need to sell more things. We need to create more things. But the way that the science says, it's beyond the action. It goes back into your belief system of why you did or didn't get the result that you wanted, and that those beliefs started as a thought in your mind. And so we talked about this in Solve for Happy, that in the final parts of the book, Mo was reconciling the fact that his son wanted him to be happy. His son lived a happy life. And here he was now wanting those same things for his other children and for himself. And so if we know that that has to come from our mind, if you go back to the How of Happiness, that book was talking about that once you get your mind right, then you know what the actions are or the inactions are that you can take to lead a happier life. But it has to start first in the way you think. And I love how she shared that in the intro, Sam. She said, according to a current theory of the brain, the unconscious mind does crucial work in forming judgments, motives, and feelings outside of our awareness or conscious control. And one factor that influences the work of the unconscious is the accessibility of information. So working with a coach is the best way for you to unlock what I would call your subconscious mind, because coaching perceives that you already have all the answers inside of you. You just don't take action. You don't have the right belief system or structure or systems. And that comes from the way that you think. And if you could change your thinking, you could change your life.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun to watch people break that down. And, as they make some statement of like, oh, I can't do this, or, oh, it's like, it's too much. And it's like, as you work with somebody and you break that down, and it really is kind of getting back to the type of question you're asking is like, do I believe it's possible? Right? Do I really think I can get to this goal? And sometimes you start working on something and you realize I got something in my way that feels like, that I just need to work through. And then, she goes into the second question is, what is happiness? Which, like, I mean, we've been exploring that for months now at this point, right? And what made me smile so much, and what was like this serendipitous order to these books that we've done is, she threw some quotes by Aristotle and by Blaise Pascal and, things that are like what they said happiness was. But then she said, even people who can't agree on what it means to be happy can agree that most people can be happier according to their own particular definition. I know when I feel happy. And that took me back to the first book, The How of Happiness. And that was really kind of where Sonia brought us to, is that happiness is subjective. And so like you can measure your own happiness based on what she calls a subjective happiness scale, right? Like it's not some universal definition of happiness, really. Like you can go look it up in the dictionary, but but you know it when you find it, right? Like you know it when you're there, and it is subjective to you and to your space. But it's not necessarily about being happy. Like, I don't want to be happy by your definition. It's me being happy by my definition. And the journey is being happier than the current state. And like, I know that when I feel that, like, and I see that. And Sonia and the How of Happiness gives us like a measurable scale to increase our happiness. And as we did that, I mean, mine went up. I think it was like 17% just as we explored the book, and I was tracking it week over week. Like, I saw it happen, and I laughed at that because I was like, this is the subjective happiness scale. Here it is. And, as she's exploring this, what is happiness? That's what she came down to. It's basically what the research is telling us.
It's really cool to see that she did live out loud what Sonia wrote in the book, that we also lived out loud. And now we're seeing another person who we don't know that went through a similar experience. And so I love that she shared this one part in this intro where she was saying that finding happiness isn't like this journey that's really far away. She said you could find it in your kitchen. You could find it in unusual circumstances. And then she quotes this play called The Bluebird. Now, funny story is that Olivia and Vincent were in that play when they were young in a community theater play. And the whole gist of the play is that two children spend a year searching the world for this blue bird. And the blue bird was the was happiness. So they're searching for this bird, and in the play, the bird is flying around and they can't grasp it, but they could see it. But as soon as they get close, it's like it disappears or they don't see it. And so these two kids spend a whole year searching for this blue bird of happiness, only to find that actually it's sort of like almost a Wizard of Oz-ish kind of a play, that the bird was waiting for them all along at their house. So once they spent this whole year and they finally, they went to, a lot of these books like Eat, Pray, Love or whatever, where you have to go far away to go find your peace, was that the peace and the bird and the happiness was actually right in front of them the whole time. And it's sort of like when we talk about ikigai and finding the center of your purpose. Finding the center of your purpose doesn't mean you have to go on this long quest that you can never achieve. It's that it already exists. It's about you awakening it, perhaps. And so I liked where in the book, she was also talking about what she thought her truths were, the secrets to adulthood. So I wonder if you highlighted any of those, because I put a star by, I think, every one of them.
I just put a heart around the whole thing because I thought it was great. But what you were just saying is, she said that. And I think that that's what's important as we go on this journey, that like, this isn't about the eat, pray, love experience. This isn't about like going out and doing something. And she said, I didn't want to reject my life. I wanted to change my life without changing my life by finding more happiness in my own kitchen. And I think that that's really like the journey that you and I have been on, but it fits along with what you're saying. And that's, I think, important for people to understand. We're not going to take you on a journey where it's like, and now we travel to Timbuktu and, we give up all of our worldly possessions. No, this is like just little stuff in the day-to-day of your life and, figuring that out. But yeah, she realized as she was piecing this together that she needed to write down some of her secrets of adulthood, which were adorable. And some of them I was just like, yep, I totally love it. But it's things like, it's okay to ask for help. Bring a sweater. It's over-the-counter medicines are very effective. You can't profoundly change your children's natures by nagging them or singing or signing them up for classes, right? Don't let perfect be the enemy of good. Like there were so many great little nuggets in this. And this is something that I hearted the whole thing, but I starred for myself of like, what does my list look like? And it's funny. When I started my business, I hired a coach, and that was on his intake form as I was signing up and giving him information about myself. He had this section that was like, give me your philosophies for life. And it was the first time I'd ever written them down. That's kind of what she's writing here. These are her secrets of adulthood, but they're sort of like your philosophies. And as I pieced it together, I was like, this is really putting together an interesting picture for me, right? And and then I took that list of stuff and I went to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, here's my some philosophies I live my life by. And then I was asking it some questions about how do you piece that together? What does this look like? It was a super interesting journey. So I think what she did here with this, writing down your secrets of adulthood, I would encourage people to go do this. But what are your secrets of adulthood? What are your philosophies of life? What are the things that you live by? I mean, I think 3 or 4 of mine are quotes from my grandmother, but what are those things? And then, there's some fun AI tools you can go to I don't know, piece together, have a fun conversation and see what it does. But I loved these.
I think this is really something that could be a cool leadership development exercise.
Oh, yeah.
Because it will help you have self-awareness. And if you could be happier at work and be a happier leader, one of the things that Gretchen says is working on my happiness wouldn't just make me happier, it would boost the happiness of the people around me. And if you consider yourself a leader and your role is to elevate the potential and the purpose and the passions of the people around you, then if you're happier, it just stands to reason that they would intrinsically become happier. I used to have this boss, Sam. Oh my God. This has probably been, I'm going to say maybe 8-ish years ago or so. And at the time, I was responsible for a large program, but indirectly responsible for a team of about 22 people. So they didn't directly report to me, but they were responsible for the outcomes of the program. And so by nature, the people that were around me were people that I somewhat handpicked to be a part of that program. So there was already trust, and there was already a belief system, and there was already good quality work because these people were amazingly smart and talented at what they did. But their own managers were not directing the outcomes of this particular program or project. And I can recall one day having a leadership development conversation, with my manager. And he said, I was struggling because it was really hard to measure what we were doing. And so he said, Denise, the only thing I want you to do is I want you to be responsible to make your team happy. And I sat back from that, and we were all, the whole quote unquote team, because nobody reported to me, was like, you can't make us happy. Like, that we know has to come from within. And so I went back to the boss and I said, how do you measure that? How do you measure if I've made someone happy? By what? By work? By, what some person's version of happiness at work could be very different than somebody else's version of it. And then I remembered that maybe a few years after that, I was in a John Maxwell conference, and he was talking about this concept of happiness. And he said, the number one thing you need to do, and it paused, and it was quiet because everyone's writing down what they think the number one thing is to be more happy. And so he came back and he said, the number one thing you can do is get over yourself. And he ended up writing a song after that, which is kind of funny. So he wrote a song with a couple of his friends, and that it was about that you might have all these high standards and all of this stuff, but that at the end, when you're a leader, it's not about you, it's about others. And you cannot give yourself over to them if you don't get over yourself first. And so it makes me often think back to that time with that manager where he said, you need to make your team happy. And at the time I felt like I was happy, but that made me not happy listening to him say that that's your goal, because how could you measure something like that?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And now we actually know a way to measure that. But again, like that would be, that's an interesting thought process. And what an interesting thing for a boss to say that you're responsible for. Yeah. Very interesting. I like that. So,
and by the way, when I told the team that was my goal, it kind of made all of them unhappy. So it had the reverse effect.
Right. Yeah. It's that's interesting. There's a lot to explore in that. That is, my brain's going a mile a minute here. But I thought it was interesting, right? I think we're kind of getting to the end of our time here, but there's this conversation she had with her husband, and he said, so if you're pretty happy, why do a happiness project? Yeah. And she said, I am happy, but I'm not as happy as I should be. I have such a good life, and I want to appreciate it more and live up to it better. And I loved that, right? Because she had said the other part earlier in the chapter, but the live up to it better. Like, I have a good life and I want to live up to it better. Like, and to me, it's like, that's how you show up. That's the actions, that's the habits you put into place. It's it's of the 12 different things that Sonia gave us in the How of Happiness to go explore to make yourself happier. It's what do you do? And it's funny, she even gives her score for the happiness scale, and it's above average. Like she scored above average on happiness. Like, she was already more happy than most people, or like the average of the scores of people. But she wanted to live up to her life better. And I just like that. I'm like, man, I got to put that on a Post-it note somewhere. I'm going to see it every day of, am I living up to this life that I have, this life that I was given, this life that I've worked for, right? Like, that is a good question.
It's a good question. And I love that was the question she asked herself, because this book, when it came out, this was just her personal quest, but she has now built an entire business around the success that she got out of living this out loud herself through her own personal journey. So next week, we're going to take you on the journey 1 month at a time, but at a week at a time. And I can't wait to explore this with you, Sam, on our own quest for elevating our happiness. Because I agree with you. When we started the quest with the How of Happiness, I generally felt like I was a happy person. You generally felt like you're a happy person. We both saw our scores increase. If you have not listened to those episodes, friends, Go back, read The How of Happiness, score yourself. My happiness absolutely increased. Now, there's days that there's fluctuation, right? Just like your heartbeat, there's fluctuation. But going through these books together has definitely shown me ways to consciously feel about happiness. And I'm sure we'll share that in future episodes about what do you do when you notice that fluctuation happening. So next week, stay tuned. We're going to jump straight in to chapter 1 or month 1, which is about what she did in January to start on her quest for the happiness project. As always, it's a pleasure. I'm always happy to be with you, Sam. And so, friends, my name is Denise Russo. My friend is Sam Powell. There's lots of notes for how you can get in touch with us in the show notes. Our producer is Scott Miller. You don't get to see him often on the screen with us, but he's so instrumental in the background. He makes us happy and he brings this happiness to you each Wednesday. If you haven't started to subscribe or share our podcast, please do that. New episodes come out every single Wednesday. We now are on pretty much all the platforms, including YouTube, where you can access the podcast, Apple, Spotify, Fathom, wherever you like to listen to shows. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a note. What makes you happy, or what are you hoping to get out of this next book, The Happiness Project? But for now, let's end it for today and share that this has been another episode of What's on Your Bookshelf.